So my friend Jessica had just gotten married. And about the same time, her epic battle to evict her nightmare tenant had come to a head at the worst possible time. She got her eviction order, but it was going to be for while she was on her honeymoon in Germany. So she asked my wife Mary if Mary could take care of a couple little favors for her. The first was, to everyone, to the surprise of everyone involved, Kim had cleared out of the house early, so she wanted Mary to take care of changing the locks on her townhouse to prevent any further mischief from this terrible tenant. And the second favor was, could we show up on the day of the eviction and meet the sheriff's deputy and make sure that everything went smoothly? So of course, Mary, being a good friend, said yes. And then the week of the wedding and the eviction, things kind of went bonkers at Mary's job, and so being the dutiful husband, I asked, what can I do to help? And we talked about it, and I agreed that I would handle all of the eviction-related tasks because I couldn't go sit in Mary's office. So the first task is changing the locks, and Jessica has already arranged for a locksmith to come, so I don't have to worry about that. I just have to take off work in the middle of the day, go meet the locksmith, and that's very easy. He meets me there. He gets to work changing the locks. I'm not paying a whole lot of attention. I'm reading my BlackBerry, but it seems like it's pretty easy. He's done in like 20 minutes. Somehow this still costs several $100s, but it's done. I didn't pick him, and so it's all wound up. It's all done, and I go back to work, and one favor down. Great. The next day, Mary gives me some bad news. She's gotten an email from Jean, Jessica's attorney, explaining that as part of the eviction process, we have to have the locks changed while the sheriff is there, in front of the sheriff. And I guess this is because they want to make sure that you don't actually kick out your tenant before the official scheduled date of the eviction. Well, this is kind of throwing a wrench into my week. It's actually the first week of a new job for me, and I've already taken off in the middle of the day once to go change the locks the first time. So now we somehow have to get the locks changed back to the old ones, so when the sheriff's deputy shows up, we can change them again in front of him. I don't really want to do this for a lot of reasons, not least of which the first one costs so much, I don't really want to have Jessica pay for it again, and I definitely don't want to try and track her down on her honeymoon to explain to her that she needs to pay for 2 lock changings or perhaps 3. So I have this idea that the locksmith, when I was there the first time, he got it done super fast. And like I said, I wasn't paying a lot of attention, but I figure it must have been pretty easy because he did it so fast. And so my idea is, when he was done, I gathered all the lock parts up and threw them in a trash bag and threw them in the trunk of my car because I was going to take them to metal recycling, being a good environmentally conscious citizen. So I have all these parts, and I have some locks that need to be changed, and I'm reasonably handy, so I figure I'll just do it myself. That's, this is a much simpler plan because then I can go at my convenience and take the brand new shiny locks off, put the old ones on, and then when the deputy comes, I can just change them again right in front of him. Good plan, I think. I explained this to Mary, and she's like, are you sure you know how to change the locks? And I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely know how to change the locks. And you have all the parts and everything? Oh yes, definitely, 100% sure that everything is there and it's fine. And she's like, all right, if you think it'll work, that sounds like a good idea. So Thursday rolls around, and I am ready to execute step 1 of my money-saving plan. I get off work a little later than I intend to. So I go home, gather up some tools, I got my trash bag full of lock parts, and I go to Jessica's townhouse to start the plan. And right away, I hit a couple problems, both related to the fact that the power has been shut off in Jessica's house. Problem number 1 is it's dark. And I've anticipated this, so I brought some flashlights, and I'm moving the flashlights around to try and shine them onto where I'm working so I can see okay. And the other problem comes when I find out it's not actually quite as easy to swap the locks out as I thought when I wasn't actually paying attention to the locksmith. So there's no air conditioning in the house because there's no power. And I'm kneeling in this open doorway, and it's a pretty hot September evening, so sweat is starting to pour down my face. I'm working at the lock, trying to get it going. And after about 40 minutes, maybe, I'm close to having the last screw in the back of the doorknob, except the doorknob's in the way of the damn screwdriver. And I'm going at it, and the door keeps moving back and forth, and I'm trying to hold it with one knee as I kneel, and the flashlights keep falling over. And it's at this point where I got sweat pouring down my face, I'm swearing at the lock, I have a flashlight between my teeth, trying to see. This is when the cop surprises me from behind. I hear a very loud, "What do you think you're doing there, sir?" And I wish I could say I had like some epiphany where time slowed down and I reevaluated all my life choices. But really, I would just like do a, like, very surprised. And I realize all of a sudden that probably this looks suspicious because I am kneeled in the doorway of a darkened house, taking apart the lock with a flashlight between my teeth. And so I think, well, whatever I say next, because the cop's got his flashlight pointed at me, and I'm like almost blinded, but I can see it's definitely a cop. I see his uniform. He doesn't have his hand on his gun yet, but it's in the neighborhood. So whatever I say next has to be convincing. So I have to gather my thoughts and give a calm, logical explanation of what I'm doing, because I'm sure he's a reasonable, open-minded person, and if I just explain clearly what's going on, he'll understand. So I started my explanation. "Hi, my name is David Supley Foxworth. I'm changing the locks in this house because my friend Jessica got married and she had an eviction, and I changed the locks once, but then the lawyer told us we have to do it again in front of the deputy, so now I'm changing the locks again, and I have to do it this time and then another time, and I have her phone number. You can call her if you want, but she's in Germany, so she might not get it." Smooth. Well, the cop seems a little bit puzzled by this, but not immediately threatened, because he doesn't put his hand on his gun, and I guess I'm not a particularly threatening sight, kneeled with the flashlight in my mouth. And so he asked me to get out of the doorway and sit on the sidewalk with my hands on my knees, hand over my driver's license, and he asked me to go through the story twice more, and he occasionally asks questions as I'm making various points. And after the third time through the story, he sort of glances over his shoulder and he says, "Does this sound okay to you?" And it's this point that I realize that in my distraction, in my like laser-like focus on the cop and his giant flashlight and his potential firearm, I have not noticed that it wasn't two lights shining in my face, or it wasn't one light shining in my face, it was actually two lights shining in my face. And sort of behind and to the right of the cop, I see there's a second light, and that second light is attached to a video camera being held up by a man who's filming the whole thing, but up to this point has not said anything. And the man holding the camera says, "Well, Jessica Piscatelli is the homeowner of this townhouse, and she did say some of her friends would be coming by, so yes, I guess it's okay." And the cop says, "Well, you called it in. If it sounds okay to you, I'm gonna go." And he packs himself into his police cruiser and he heads out. And the man with the camera still doesn't lower the camera, he's still filming me, introduces himself as Christopher Robin, an officer of the Homeowners Association. And then he says to me, "Now, if you were going to be doing this, you really should have called me ahead of time to make sure it was okay." I'm so dumbfounded by this statement, I really don't have a response. And I do have a lock to finish, and I want to go home. And this is actually the first time I've ever been asked by a police officer to sit with my hands up. So I'm a little not myself. So I get back to work, and I get to work on the lock, and I get it done reasonably fast. Christopher Robin's talking at me the whole time. And finally I'm able to say my awkward goodbye to Christopher Robin. And I get in my car, and I drive away, and I look behind me in the rearview mirror, and I see he's still filming me as I drive away. I presume to have some additional footage to submit to his CNN iReport. A couple days later, it's the eviction date. I go there and I meet the sheriff's deputy, and it's actually a much calmer experience. For one thing, it's in the day. It's just me, the sheriff's deputy, and Gene. The deputy and Gene are both in a pretty jovial mood because there's no angry tenant whose stuff is being pushed out on the lawn. So they're swapping stories about the worst evictions they've ever been on. And they're actually having such a good time, they actually forget that I'm supposed to change the locks in front of the deputy again. And the deputy forgets that his car keys are in his cruiser when he locks it, and so he has to call for backup to come unlock his cars from his sheriff's deputy cruiser. But I get the old locks taken off and the new locks on, and the eviction's done, and I go back to work, and I am grateful, and I'm grateful for two things. First, that the favors for Jessica are done, and the second is that I didn't have to track her down in Germany to ask her for bail money.